Well, I wrote a piece for the Australian newspaper today, and in that I made several references relevant to the post-election, to the issues now literally overwhelming the Labor Party. You see, for months leading up to the federal election, and indeed during the course of the election, Mr Shorten and his acolytes, as if from a permanent script, regularly, repeatedly, and often personally, and certainly leeringly, appropriated to the government and Scott Morrison every epithet to suggest disorganisation, disunity and chaos. Indeed, the Labor Party launch saw Tanya Plibersek demean herself, describing people who might disagree with the Labor Party on major issues as people cheering on, quote, hatred or fear. We saw where the hatred and fear were in the booths on Saturday. An Abbott follower was stabbed. Abbott's posters defaced with the C word and images of Hitler. Well, how the wheel turns. Chris Bowen invited those who didn't like his economic policies to vote against them, and they did, in droves. 2 out of every 3 Australians who voted on Saturday voted for someone other than the Labor candidate. In Queensland, it was almost 3 out of 4 who voted for someone other than the Labor candidate. The Labor Party have been wiped out. Now, I just want you to have a look at this map here. This is the map of Australia. Now, look up north. The red is the Labor Party. That's those 2 seats I was talking about. The dark red is 1 seat. That is Bob Katter, poor fellow. He's got a seat bigger than Victoria. Go south to New South Wales. The green, that is the National Party. Now, what do you see? What do you see? Almost nothing. Specks of red. And what conclusion do you draw? Labor, apart from the Northern Territory, check the map, and a bit of Tasmania, are just now an inner Sydney, Melbourne party. You can go to Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and have a look at those areas on the map, and not hit a Labor seat. Labor are now reduced to a party, I repeat, of inner Melbourne and inner Sydney. All that blue is Liberal. Now, many of us grew up with a National Labor Party machine that was fearsome. Now, the Labor Party is a provincial soy latte set that can't win anything outside a bicycle ride from the ABC studios. Can you imagine Bob Hawke or Paul Keating or Barry Unsworth leading a Labor Party that loses in outer Western Sydney? A Labor Party that would sack miners and enforce electric cars that no one could afford. Look, I'm sorry, Labor has no idea anymore who and what they are. No time to talk here about the experts whose full-time job it is to read and report on likely election outcomes. It was beyond laughable to hear people on Saturday night arguing that Labor would win 80-odd seats. Yet, just as Labor were hammered in defiance of the experts in New South Wales, the election, so it has now happened federally. In what must be one of the profound ironies of Saturday, the Labor Party in New South Wales were holding off finding a new leader until after the federal election. Now Labor in New South Wales and federally is without a leader. Scapegoats are being sought. The party's not devoid of good people, but it is hopelessly devoid of people with judgment. Yet some, since Saturday, have sought to argue the virtue of their economic policies and, in fact, defend them, arguing that the party had failed to adequately explain the policies. The truth is they were perfectly explained, arrogantly and repetitively. But what Labor did not understand was they were poking the bear, which is the silent majority, and they took their revenge. For example, in the Hunter and in North Queensland, here was the Labor Party in bed with the Greens, demonising coal-fired power, and their Greens partner arguing the end of the coal mining industry and the end of the $65 billion coal export trade. Rank-and-file members of the Labor Party, workers, voted for their own survival, not that of Labor. The voter, silent and often afraid to speak out, had his say in the privacy of the ballot box. The massive push by churches and other groups, especially ethnic groups, to vote for national values took hold. These people don't answer polls. They just vote. And they took electoral scalps to defend their jobs, their livelihoods and their way of life. Now we'll see the real meaning of political chaos as various candidates battle for the task of rebuilding Labor from the mess into which Bill Shorten has taken them. There are 2 problems there. The first is that Scott Morrison on Saturday virtually won the next election as well. What were marginal coalition seats now enjoy thumping majorities thanks to Labor's abysmal policy formulation. The second problem is a bigger one. Those seeking the leadership federally were themselves the architects of the very policies that brought on this Labor humiliation. If Anthony Albanese can establish that these policies were formulated without his imprimatur, then he'll walk in. It's because of this policy implosion, ripping $387 billion of tax from working and corporate Australia, $34 billion out of superannuation, stealing franking credits, standing negative gearing on its head to produce higher rents and reduce prices for housing at the point of sale, a 50% increase in capital gains tax for some poor coot who's trying to save for his retirement. And that's before we get to an energy policy, which, according to Professor McKibben, would be $60 billion more damaging to the economy than that of the coalition and cost hundreds of thousands of jobs with electricity prices going through the roof. Thank God we don't cop that. The public said, pull the other leg. It plays Nat King Cole. Some say the bolter in the leadership contest is the newly minted member for Rankin, one Jim Chalmers. This is the bloke who was Wayne Swan's chief of staff when 4 years of surpluses were promised and not delivered. Handed over a debt of $176 billion to Tony Abbott's coalition government, and if reports are correct, played a key role in Labor's policy to ditch franking credits. Good luck in finding a leader out of that lot who won't be crucified by a Prime Minister right on top of the detail. The chaos that Labor wanted to attribute to the coalition has now arrived on their own doorstep.